Welcome to the Livin'Sky Podcast, a show about raising connected, resilient kids in a world that often forgets what they need most. I'm Lena Livin'Sky, a pediatric speech-language pathologist, holistic feeding specialist, and a mom, here to help you understand your child's body, behavior, and biology in a whole new way. Each episode brings you simple, practical tools to support healthy eating, development, and family connection without the overwhelm. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Okay. Today, I'm welcoming someone whose work speaks directly to the heart of so many mothers who listen to this show. Dr. Angele Close is a clinical psychologist, author, and mom of three who helps mothers break generational cycles, heal old wounds, and feel more grounded and confident in motherhood. After her own transition into motherhood cracked her open in unexpected ways, she discovered internal family systems and realized how deeply our inner world shapes the way we parent, connect, and care for ourselves. Her upcoming book, Unburdening Motherhood, brings this healing model into everyday homes and offers moms real tools for shifting shame, softening survival patterns, and reconnecting with the parts of themselves that often get lost in the chaos of modern parenting. Angele's work aligns beautifully with what we talk about on the show, speaks to the biology of stress, the nervous system, the myths of the good mom, and the emotional patterns we pass on to our children. And you know me, I'm always thinking about how our inner state influences our child's ability to feel safe, eat well, explore foods, and thrive. I'm so honored to have you here today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Lena. Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. So, you speak a lot about how becoming a mother cracked you open. What surprised you most about your own transition into motherhood, and how did it shape the work that you do now?
Yeah, well, it completely shifted my career to focus on parenting and motherhood, something I never anticipated. And of course, so it was through my own parenting experiences. So when my kids were little, although I was certainly exhausted working and I had three kids all close in age, they're now teenagers. But I mean, for me, the process was fairly smooth. You know, I had them without any issues and it was exhausting, but I felt like confident, like, okay, I got this, I can do this. But things got a little trickier when my kids started to get to the age where I guess we would imagine this is time to discipline. I dislike that word for certain reasons and connotations, but you know, where kids start to really push boundaries on us and kind of the crux of, you know, they're at the age where they should know better, or so I would tell myself, right? And it started to get really difficult for me. One of my kids is neurodivergent, and the traditional ways of just, you know, saying something, instructing, and then they're supposed to listen, do what I tell them to do. It just wasn't working. And I found myself reacting in ways in the presentation of my kids' protests and negotiations and just kind of not conforming the way I sort of thought this was going to be easier, and they had big feelings. And despite being, you know, my background is in emotion focused therapy and I was teaching mindfulness and meditation and thinking and having done my own therapy through graduate school, I thought I was going to be quote unquote better at this. And I found myself just reacting and trying to shut down their emotions and angry every day and not liking that, not enjoying it, quite frankly. And then judging myself thinking, God, I thought I'd be way better at this. This is not at all what I thought it was going to be. And that really was what kind of broke me open and made me realize I have some inner work to do. Like something's amiss here, because despite all my clinical training and past therapy, like parenting really cracked me open in ways. And of course, I wanted to do a better job. I was, you know, I didn't want to have these big reactions. I knew that being angry every day I wasn't showing up as the mom I wanted to be. And so it was at that time that I learned about internal family systems, which was kind of, Lena, the missing piece for me, because it helped me, despite my mindfulness and my meditation training, it really helped me understand my inner reactions with much better understanding. This language of parts, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I kind of had something that I could do inside to understand my own inner reactions and help them shift in real deep ways. So in ways that were kind of mind body. So not just like, because we can read a book. I mean, I was reading parenting books, right? And I had these tools and tricks, but it wasn't until I really integrated it and started practicing myself and changing how I was relating to my own inner parts that, of course, were reacting to my children, that's when I started to really notice, my goodness, this is so helpful. I felt more confident. I felt like I could stay calm more, not all the time, of course, but I had more self compassion with that self understanding, and my relationship with my kids got better. And it was so helpful in actually kind of a pretty short period of time that I became really passionate and thought, gosh, this model can help so many moms because it really, really helped me. And so that's what led me to write my book and really change the work that I do. And I guess I would say also the piece I didn't mention is learning about motherhood and matrescence also informed wanting to help mothers, because as I was going through all this and feeling these ways, and I just didn't really have the community, the connection, I thought, no mom that I know is talking about how hard this really is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my dual passion, is really to bring it to moms, because I feel like culturally we don't support them in the way that they need. We're not addressing moms' needs and experiences the way that we need to. So that's also my mission.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible because I couldn't agree with you more. I think moms need community, they need support, they need their village, but with the current lifestyle we have now, oftentimes women don't have that. And
That's
depending
right.
on what country you're in, whether you're well, we're in the US right now, so there's just no support system even in terms of childcare, right? Oftentimes mom has to go
Yes.
back to work and it's just you're juggling so many things and it becomes
Yeah,
very stressful.
exactly.
Yeah. So I definitely want to learn a ton about internal family systems. So if you could just explain it and help us understand
Mhm.
why it is so powerful for moms and maybe help us try to incorporate it into our everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. We use basically IFS, we view kind of the human psyche and how we're hardwired as having more, it's more like we have parts. Like, yes, you have yourself. So I don't want to, sometimes people get a little maybe confused or a little feel threatened by this idea. I'm not saying you all have multiple personality disorder, right? That is a clinical diagnosis of sorts, but we are all made up in ways that we have different parts of us that take on life for us. And one of the ways I like to just give an example right off the hop, because we all can relate to that experience in life. Now, whether it's you decide you want to lose weight, so you want to start a diet, let's say you have a part of you that gets on board and gets all the plans and, okay, I'm going to join the gym and eat the meals and do all the things. And then inevitably, you'll have other parts of you, well, eventually, suddenly it's like, "Oh, I just want that pizza more than anything. I don't care about my goals." And we set, and what seems like self-sabotage is actually our different parts of our system. So we see this with dieting, we see this with drinking behaviors, any kind of addictive stuff is often because our parts are in opposition. Or even if you think, "I want to leave a relationship," and we flip-flop, right? We're like, "Oh, on the one hand, I think, I really want to stay." And then there's other parts of us that'll pull us in other directions and think, well, no, these are the reasons we want to leave. And so if we just think about our life, oftentimes we can see how we kind of have different parts of us, right? A logical part, and then maybe a part that's more emotional and spontaneous, rebellious even. And so I say that first just to for people to kind of make sense of that. And where it's helpful as a mother is because we also have what I call mom parts. We have the mama bear part that needs to advocate, especially if you have a kid with a special need and you're, helping them in the education system. You have a mama bear part that's going to do that advocacy. It feels very fierce. It feels really determined to protect your child. Or you might have, I mean, most moms have a definite manager part, which is like managing all the things and getting all the tasks done and handling and carrying that invisible load. That's a part of us that carries us. But we also might have parts, and in IFS, that are kind of, we call them firefighter parts. They're the parts that try to, when difficulty or stress or pain or even like something that's very difficult or even traumatic arises within us, like emotions, we have these firefighters that they want to put out the fire. So the manager parts are protective. They're both protective parts, okay? The managers try and do life, protect us from having bad experiences, because we've all had them usually, very shortly early in life. We start to have experiences in this world, whether it's in our family of origin or at school. And that might be just a misunderstanding of something embarrassing happening, but it could be even more significant, like abuses or trauma. So there's a full range of just really difficult experiences. And so our parts develop within us to try and protect us. And so we have these managers to prevent harm from happening, bad feelings, bad experiences. And the firefighters, when inevitably something does get triggered or activated, tries to stop it. So these are parts that might find, okay, I just want to binge watch Netflix. I'm kind of done. I just want to put on the TV and sort of escape a bit. So there's lots of ways in our world that our firefighters help us kind of tune out. But it's to understand within the model is like those parts are playing a part to help us calm, soothe, decompress when we're overwhelmed. And so I think for moms, when we understand that these are parts of us, for me anyways, and the moms that I work with, it's really, really helpful because it's like if I overreacted or reacted in a way that I actually don't really like, when we understand why the part is doing what it's doing, in other words, trying to protect us, it's got some role that it plays within our system. Suddenly things make sense and it gives us a new way to understand ourselves and then to start to react differently, to shift our experience. Because when we see all of our parts have our best intention for us, they're really trying to help us adapt and survive. And once we can connect with them with the kind of interest, get to know them, get curious about them, and understand them, that's really where everything can change internally for us.
I'm a huge believer that light is one of the most powerful medicines for our kids and for us. That's why I love Bon Charge. Their blue light blocking glasses, red light therapy devices, and many other products are designed to support your circadian rhythm and help your family sleep and feel better naturally. In our modern world of screens and artificial light, these small shifts make a big difference. Calmer evenings, deep sleep, better focus, and happier moods. I use Bon Charge products every single day, and even my son has his own pair of blue light blocking glasses for evening story time. You can check out all their products at boncharge.com and use code LENAL to save 15% off your purchase.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that short enough? I know you asked for short. I don't know.
No, I know. I mean, I'm just trying to, I guess, like get like a speed masterclass on this because
Yeah.
everybody, I feel like every mom is like listening in closely, like, what do I do? Um, no, this was a really good explanation. Now I'm trying to put it together in terms of like, so how do we use that to our advantage so that when we're in crisis, when let's say I work with picky eaters, right? So let's say we cook dinner, we're so overwhelmed after work, we're tired, and of course there is an issue at the table because your child doesn't want to eat it. And then you're just feeling so burnt out and just overwhelmed and you'd
Mhm.
want to blow up, right?
Mhm.
And you just want to yell and just
Yeah,
go leave the situation and just and
that's
just
right.
kind of react that way. Like how do we use essentially a system like this where we're understanding what's going on internally to problem solve in a situation like that?
That's a great question. Absolutely. So, I mean, and let me take a pause here and I got to think of that myself. And I can use myself as an example because one of my kids is not a easy eater. Food, he has a nervous system that can very much react to the demands of eating and has food sensitivities. And so, just to make this a better example, I'll use myself, right? And so, understanding that we have different parts that are going to react to that situation. I also want to name the context of in our psyches, right? Our parts have absorbed ideas about what it means to be a good mom. So that in the work that I do, I think that's very important to just place the context is we live in a culture um, where there have historically, and so that idea of what is a good mom certainly has changed over time.
Yes.
Right now, we're in a phase of the intensive mother. So it's really this idea of super mom. I mean, we have the word, right? If you've heard of it, I know I did, called
Absolutely.
super mom, and I mean, so this idea that we are everything and we do all the things right. It really drives a perfectionistic idea of not only are we doing everything, but we're doing it at high intensity, which is impossible, right? So our parts have picked up on this in direct messages throughout our lives. And now we find ourselves in this situation of being a mom. And so a lot of that is unconscious if we're not aware of it, right? But our parts have picked up on it. So some of the myths that are probably functioning back in our subconscious for moms, I'll see if it relates. So one is, a good mom, quote unquote, is one who gets pregnant naturally and easily, bonds with their baby instantly. This is a myth that we experience. And I've heard moms who feel like, well, if I needed to use, IVF treatments, then already I'm failing at motherhood, right? Or if I can't breastfeed my child, they already start to feel like they're not doing it right. This is where the myths show up for moms. The idea that we love all aspects of motherhood is another myth. And this one, so what this means, and this one definitely I experienced, is so if suddenly I have parts that don't like being a mom, that inside my mind, I have this voice that says, screw this, man, I did not sign up for this. This is, or I'm so overwhelmed, this feels like too much. Maybe a part is saying, I can't do this. That's a part that's feeling overwhelmed with the duties of this, what it means to be a good mom. Also, another myth is that a good mom is all self-sacrificing. So this really breeds a lot of problems for us mom. This is where we have mom guilt. If we do anything for ourselves, some parts within us who've absorbed this myth will tell us, well, you're being selfish. It's not okay to do this, right? So we deplete ourselves because we carry in our psyches this idea that to take care of us is somehow wrong or bad, that we're not being a good mom. So we put ourselves at the bottom of our to-do list and we get neglected. And that doesn't serve our children and certainly doesn't serve us. But if we've absorbed this myth and our part takes that on, that can be what happens, right? And so I say that to say that our parts have absorbed these ideas, also this idea, good mom does it all on her own. She doesn't need help, as we talked at the beginning, right, Lena? This idea, like, we don't have a village. You're supposed to do it all on your own. So all of a mom who's now sitting at the dinner table, right, whose kid won't eat, to be aware that some of these myths might be in the background. Some of our parts have absorbed these ideas. And so to know that some of her inner reactions now to her kid resisting food is part of probably her activation. So for instance, a good mom, feeds, myth might be a good mom feeds her kids well. And so therefore, the second the kid's refusing or having struggles with food, her myth inside her head that I'm not a good mom might be getting activated. And so if we're now that belief, I'm not a good mom if I'm not feeding my kid, is in the background of her mind and her emotions, her parts are kind of sensing that, she's likely to react in a certain way from a protective part, right? Because we want to defend ourselves against that. And so a manager part within her might get more controlling, try to change that because in our system, that feels like a threat because we want to be a good mom, right? I mean, that's the kind of the granted here. Everyone listening to this show is listening because the stakes are high. They love their kids. It really matters to them. It's tied up with our heart and our value system. And so if we've absorbed, as most moms have, some of these myths, they're depleted because they've been self-sacrificing and not actually taking good enough care of themselves. So we know when we're stressed out and overwhelmed, we don't have the patience, we don't have the bandwidth. If we ourselves and our body and our mind and our heart are fully depleted and running on empty, we're more likely going to react. So that's one impact with that situation, right? Have we been neglecting our needs? What of these myths are we believing in the background? So if I believe that I'm only a good mom if my kid's eating the food, that's going to feel really problematic. Our inner system is going to register that as a threat. And we may not see with clarity what it is that's the answer here. Like we miss that connection with our kid in the moment, right? So while IFS, I guess I haven't yet mentioned that part. So our parts are a protective system, but we also all carry within us what in IFS has been called self-energy with a capital S. We can use other words for it, right? But it's within us. We all have this energy of, calm, curiosity, openness. It's like a heart-centered energy. This is the wisdom we all carry within when we're in a relaxed state, when our nervous system is regulated and we're not in a threat system. This is true for all of us. We all carry this energy within us. Yeah. And that's the energy that when we can connect with it and access it with our kids, we have greater connection, we have greater clarity, we have that compassion, and we're better able to problem solve and understand. So the model helps us understand that it's our protective system that's usually the default. So in this situation with my kid, these are the parts of me that are my quick reactors. And so the benefit of understanding IFS is we can start to get a relationship with these protectors. We can start to befriend them, get curious about them, understand. And that's where we start to learn, okay, what are you believing in that moment? So what would that look like? If I was working with a mom, Lena, I would have her, okay, put yourself in that scene and let's understand, okay, notice the part's reaction. So the trigger point is my kid, say, throwing the food on the floor. Let's say, okay, pause. Okay, notice what happens inside your body. What part is there? And our parts might show up with that voice in the head, or we might just feel heat all over our body. Like it could be somatic. Some parts live in our bodies more like sensation or emotion. It's like, oh, I'm just so mad, or I feel tense, right? Or we could just sense a part even around us, or we might get an image. So people feel their parts a bit differently. But I just say that to give people choices and know. So you notice the part that comes up for you and you get curious about it. So you're the one observing the part, trying to understand what's its motivation here. So it's like, for instance, while I feel myself all hot and tense, I notice my tone, I get sharp, and then my kid doesn't react. Now my kid feels like they're getting snapped at. Okay, so notice the part that's sharp. What's it afraid would happen if it's not going to be sharp? Like it's raising its voice. It feels like, okay, and so usually the person's going to kind of start to connect with that part and see it just wants to control because there is a threat. The threat is, this part believes, well, if I don't snap or really get my kid's attention, they're not going to eat. Okay, so what's the fear there if they don't eat? Well, then it means, and that's why we start to get at what are these beliefs? What are the fears? And we get to a place of, I'm not a good mom. Something bad's going to happen, right? And so we can then, in that moment, help that part see that it's not true, right? So it's like this deep deconditioning of the parts that are believing these myths and these ideas. And then we can update that part. So that's a key part in this. Once we have that relationship from our self energy to this manager, this protector part in our system, we let it know that that's not true, that actually we are there as the adult. So it becomes kind of a reparenting, letting our parts have been with us most of our life, oftentimes from a very early place in our life. And so we let them know, I'm a grown-up. I'm this age, this is my child, everything's okay. And so that part that feels like it's threatened starts to soften and relax.
Yeah.
And know, actually, oh, okay. So now our conscious self energy becomes the kind of adult, even within our own system. And then that's where clarity comes because now we're not so concerned with protecting. It's like we disarm, right? The energy of like trying to force something, trying to protect from whatever we think is a threat can sort of soften and relax a bit. And then from that more self energy place, that's where we have more calm. We respond differently to our kid. And so we're kind of caring for ourselves in that moment, dispelling the myths in that moment that are kind of infusing our reactivity. And so we can respond with more clarity. And that's where we can use the tools we might have read about or heard about and learn. It's really from that place and that energy and our own kind of calmer, regulated system. But we do it by directly going to our inner protective system to help it transform and relate differently to the moment.
These days when your child refuses everything you make and you just want them to have something nourishing, that's when I grab Signals. It's a real food meal replacement shake made with organ meats, minerals, and nutrients that support kids' biology, not just fill them up. It's rich in iron, zinc, and B vitamins, the building blocks for growth, focus, and strong immune systems. And it's great for the gut. And the best part? Nate calls it his ice cream shake. That's how delicious it is. And as a mom, it feels amazing to know he's getting what his body truly needs without the fight. You can learn more at feedyoursignals.com and don't forget to use Lena10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase. Wow. Wow, that was so deep. I feel like I'm in a therapy session right now. Oh, good. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." It's like you see in my soul. It's yeah. I think as moms, we just need to understand and give ourselves grace in so
Mm.
many ways because being a mom is hard, right?
Yes, it
It's
is.
hard on so many levels, and the expectations are so high. Like you talk about this, especially in this age of social media and everything else, where you have access to these like perfectly orchestrated almost lives online, and you compare yourself, and then you're like, "Am I a bad mom? Is my house supposed to be this clean right now with 3 toddlers running around?" And then I feel like it's just constantly there's ways where you can find something that's gonna put you down. Having this understanding and awareness and ability to look within to see like, "Okay, no, this is the part of me that's speaking right now, and why is it there?" And
Mhm.
understanding yourself on this deeper level is going to allow you to just relax and start to feel better about what you're doing as a mom. And I couldn't agree more with this entire like idea of this myth of being a good mom because you hear it so much, right? And I feel like fathers, they don't have as much pressure after having kids. It's usually the moms,
Yes.
just set up by the society and the way that we live, right?
Yes.
It's weird when when a mom goes on a trip on the weekend and leaves the kids with the dad versus if the dad goes on a trip and mom is staying home with the kids, it's totally fine. Nobody even like bats an eye on that. At least that's kind of what I've encountered, what I've seen. So I love having these tools and being able to kind of, look within yourself to see like and kind of almost like parent yourself and mother yourself so that you can be a better mom to your own child.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point, Lena. Despite all the kind of feminist movement that said women deserve to be working outside their home. But what really hasn't shifted is although the younger generation of parents, I would say for sure, and research does support this, that dads are more involved in the parenting or and are more nurturing, and maybe it's the activities, like they're more involved than the previous generation for sure. But the actual division of labor hasn't really transformed for most couples. Like the majority of couples still find that the mom is doing the invisible work of carrying all the social, the calendar, the school emails, like the majority of all the work. And in this day and age, it's a lot more than it used to be because the schools are very, they'd expect a lot of involvement from parents, and the kids in the digital age, there's no landline. That's what I found is like, why suddenly I am like the social calendar for all my kids with their activities and their friends and et cetera, et cetera. And so yes, the gender division of labor is still tends to be quite traditional,
Mhm.
and moms, many, many moms, if not most, are working outside of the home. And so they're the primary, it's the double work day, so it's called. And the expectations to do it all well and to not be overwhelmed or exhausted or feel like you're dropping all the balls. I mean, that's the reality. That's what I
Mhm.
hear from moms, and they feel like they're not doing it enough, and it's yeah, and that sucks. And so I'm here to sort of dispel that and to help moms with the part of them that maybe
Mm.
is, in my book I call it the perfectionist part, right? The
Yeah.
part that, okay, what, as you said, compares, looks at the social media, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be that kind of perfect mom, and we can really drive ourselves to exhaustion, and we lose the moments of joy because if we're
We do.
to do all of the things, like I get that that's important too. I love my to-do list. I'm not going to lie. And I also know that the energy of joy comes, we need spaciousness both, in our internally to have a good laugh. We need to be
Mhm.
regulated. If we're in survivor mode, we're missing out on moments of laughter, creativity, joy, inspiration, like, and that's what children bring to us, right? That's
Mhm.
especially when they're young. Like we can be so preoccupied with trying to check our boxes and meet those cultural expectations that we miss out. And for me, that's what really drove me to like, I got to go back into therapy. I got to figure out what's coming up for me that's getting in my way because I don't want to have regret. And I don't say this to scare moms who are listening, but just to Because sometimes that's the incentive they need to prioritize themselves, right? Again, because so many moms will be on the bottom of our own list and we think, well, I don't have time for therapy or I don't have time to meditate and do this IFS meditation. And it can be 5 minutes a day. Like we do deserve to have time within ourselves to connect with our inner world, and our children will benefit. And it doesn't have to be a huge investment, but I mean, I know it to be true and I believe it is the opportunity to kind of see what we've absorbed and help those parts unburden some of these beliefs so that moms can feel more present in their moments to actually enjoy motherhood a lot more. But it's about that deconditioning so that they can choose. So they can choose what they want to subscribe to in terms of these ideas, but what they can let go of. Because I think to try to meet all of these expectations is just it's a losing journey.
Yeah, it definitely is. I also always love this analogy of like being on a plane and you put on your oxygen mask first before you put on your child's because otherwise you can't help them. And I think sometimes it's hard to fit in the self-care piece in this busy world. But like you said, even 5 minutes can be a huge difference. And then once you take this time for yourself, you can maybe come back in and hopefully it's more than five, but
Mhm.
you can come back in and be more present and enjoy what you're doing and maybe react in a different way to things that maybe before would have set you off.
Absolutely. It feels, I mean, I believe the model, it's an empowering practice.
Yeah.
And so the more you kind of will realize, oh, that's actually really helpful if I take that 5 minutes to kind of take
Mhm.
some deep breaths, calm my body, tune into it with care, see what's coming up, give those parts, even if it's just a quick, oh, okay, like just to know, okay, and just put your hand on your heart and say, okay, I see that you're there. Like you talk to the parts and say, okay, I'm here now and I care that you're suffering. This is really hard and I care about it. And you will notice the parts inside of you that are working really hard to do life for you appreciate that validation. And in that moment, there's a space between you and you access that self energy that's more conscious and aware and in the present moment. And the parts that are like self protective and trying to do life and anticipate the future and avoid pain, they calm a little bit. And so you'll get a little bit more space and awareness, and it absolutely will influence and have ripple effects on what you do in the next moment. And this is the lived reality. And in being able to just drop in and do that for yourself, you'll start to feel that empowered because you're caring for yourself. And that's what we all need. So when you start
Mhm.
giving yourself what it is you need, you can't not notice the benefits. And yeah, is your life going to change internally? Yes. And eventually, if you continue to connect with yourself in these ways, you will notice real shifts in your relationships, more joy, less reactivity. And so not that you're always going to no, in no way does this mean you're never going to have reactions, but you're going to feel confident in knowing how to, like, why that happened and what you can do for yourself. And that was a game changer for me. And that is kind of if I dare I say, a promise to people who want to start learning this practice for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think for moms, like one of the things that rings true to me, at least, from becoming a mother and from what I've heard from my friends and people around me, it's like you essentially transform into a completely different person, right? Once you give birth, and it might take a
Yes.
while for you to start to understand it and to understand like what that means. Because I feel like oftentimes as moms, we try to find ourselves again and try to go back to like how I felt before, or maybe try to understand like what's going on and kind of get a piece of ourselves back. But oftentimes you become very different. And I think getting to know yourself on that level and to understand what's going on internally is so important because then you can get out of this like fight or flight mode into more parasympathetic mode because you're starting to understand like, okay, this is what I'm reacting to. This is why. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm a bad mom, right? It's just who I am right now. And there's so many just more pieces going on in your life that are influencing how you're feeling because you're no longer just taking care of you and maybe your partner or maybe your dog, right? You have an
Mhm.
actual baby or a child with a ton of needs, and you just
Mhm.
get lost sometimes in the process. So understanding it from this perspective, I think is so healing and can bring on so much peace of mind. And just like in general, I think this is what can help you to become not only a better mom, but just like a person again, almost, I feel like.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you're bringing that in. I think it's true, Lena, and that's where, I mean, to me, motherhood is an opportunity to kind of awaken to ourselves. It's
Yeah.
a journey of growth that isn't talked about enough, I don't think, but it really is a gateway of, spiritual awakening, if you will, identity transformation. I mean, this is, the word matrescence recognizes that motherhood, in the same way that adolescents go through this total transformation, like a phoenix rising,
Mhm.
that to me is what motherhood has been. I did not expect it. And it is incredibly difficult and challenging. And it also has within it, through these challenges, opportunities for us to really grow and expand ourselves and to learn. And so, yeah, there is no going back because you can't. And some parts of you will wish you could, and some parts of you still are kind of there pre motherhood, But it is a kind of reconfiguration of your kind of whole inner system. And the parts that were really, tried really hard to be a good girl. Now that I'm a mom, well, now I'm trying to be a good mom. And so it's an opportunity to kind of heal that within us, to become more conscious in our own lives and not just kind of following all the rules, even if those rules are wrong, but also heal the little girl. It's kind of a self liberation model. And I think also we have parts, if I think of your audience in particular, the bond that we have with our children is so fierce and intense. And so it can really trigger a lot of our mom parts because we are now responsible for these little beings
Yeah.
and their well-being, and that can feel like a massive responsibility. And so I think for me too, the journey has been to see a surrendering. It's like we're so bonded and so attached, and we want all the control to protect our children. And we know the reality is they are their own beings, right? They
Mhm.
have agency. We actually don't have as much control, hardly at all, that we wish we had. And so to me, that is part of the awakening, is like, where do we let go? Our heart is outside of our body with these children that we have, and we have to let them go. It's a process of influencing them and coaching them, parenting and guiding them, and they're also their own person. And I feel like parenting that's the journey. The spiritual, to me, it is, because it's about who am I and who is my child, and we have this very intense, profound relationship together that we're constantly navigating through every phase as our children grow, right? Then we're re-navigating it. And so understanding our parts is a beautiful, I think, a very useful toolbox to have in that respect, because it's our parts that are inside of us, and that we can, I don't want to say control, but we have more power to relate with what's happening within us. We can't control the people in our lives or what happens, sadly, to what our children are going to live through and endure, but we can model that to our children. So it's a real foundation of inner resilience that we can have at all times.
Yeah.
Nothing can take that away from us. So
No.
to me, it's very empowering.
Me as well. And I think once we start to work on our own transformation and understanding what's going on internally, then the entire house almost follows, right? So it's going to affect how our children feel, how our partners feel, even the animals. I mean, they're so reactive
Yeah.
to how we are around them. So I think it is so important. And to tie that into picky eating, there is a big part of, I think, children who tend to be a little bit more picky, oftentimes their nervous system is dysregulated and they don't
Yeah.
feel connected.
Yeah.
And there's these parts that are just influencing the way they're showing up at the table. So being able to actually create this calmer, more connected environment because we're able to understand what's going on internally and maybe react in a bit of a different way because we're starting to take care of these feelings, it's going to have this ripple effect across the entire household, including mealtime.
100%, Lena. That has been my experience, that the more I started to tune into myself and heal my parts and unburden them and access more self energy within, my relationship with my kids improved. And there is that. I mean, it's contagious. Self energy is known and said to be contagious, that as we shift into that state, that energy, people feel it. They might not, I mean, they're not going to say it per se, but they will feel it, and it will influence their energy as well when we
Yeah.
show up in that way. And especially for moms who are often the matriarch of the home. I mean, their energy and their state has a lot of influence because they are often running the show, so to speak, and they can model that. And I have found too, even getting that language, like I'll model that to my children, like if feel I need to repair, if I had a reaction that was from a part, then I can take a pause and I go back in and say, and then I'm speaking more from self, but for the part, and say, yeah, that I did have a part that got really angry and it raised its voice, and I apologize, and then I've seen my kids, when I've done that, been able to do that, their nervous system just relaxes right in front of my eyes.
Mm.
So that's the other piece too, is we can model that energy, we can access it, and our children will benefit in so many ways, both from feeling more safe and comfortable, because they feel more safe when we know, when their energy and their parts, they can sense that our parts are taken care of. So I'm working on my own bodily felt sense of safety within my own system, and it does have ripple effects in the whole home.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like you can feel it. It's just the entire energy in the house shifts. Not even is the way that we react, almost like I don't know. I feel like I'm a bit of an empath, so I can feel that. There's
Yeah,
like
me
clean
too.
energy in the house when these things happen.
Me too.
But one of your specialties is helping moms break generational patterns. What is the one cycle you see most often? And how can a mom begin to change it even if she grew up with the opposite of what she wants for her children?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is where I've heard from, many moms say, yeah, like when we get curious about one of her reactions that she's bringing to me in session, and it's like, oh, that's how my mom was, or that's how my dad was, so this is where we see and we experience that intergenerational patterns, which is the parts that, of course, lived through it. And so they carry it. They carry that energy, they carry the beliefs, the past parenting paradigms that were more authoritarian. And so I work with many moms now who, there's been a big shift in how we parent, focusing based on research of, 30 years of developmental psychology now that we have, which is wonderful, that we know, being authoritarian to your children doesn't empower them and actually doesn't motivate them. That's a fear-based model that actually has a lot of ramifications on their emotional well-being and mental health. So we have that understanding now, and people want to parent differently. And so again, it's to me, I would say it's the best way to do that is by noticing the parts of you that are reacting and helping them transform, helping them get updated. And it's hopeful, because oftentimes what happens is then we feel guilty. So say we react in a way we think, yeah, that's not great. Then we feel guilty or ashamed of ourselves. And then and that sucks to feel guilt and shame. Those are painful, vulnerable emotions. And then we might find ourselves numbing, parts that come in and want us to take us out of that shame. So now we just tune out and numb out. And then the cycle, rinse, cycle, repeat. And so that's the cycle that we want to notice where that's happening, if it's happening in our life, and know that you can break out of it. And one of the ways that, in the IFS model is to go inside and understand these parts, not to shame them. You might have a part that carries that shame. And so offering it care, offering it compassion, understanding that you feel that way because you want to be a good mom, that matters to you, and you have parts that are struggling. You have parts that aren't, those are the kid parts. Like usually if I've had a bad parenting moment, it's because one of my kid parts was the one that was active. I was stressed, I was depleted, I was reactive, I was frustrated. It's a part that's reacting in that way. And instead of shaming that part, which is what it probably received when we were young, being radical and getting curious and having compassion for it. Understanding what was it trying to do, because all of our parts, again, have good intentions. We don't get rid of our parts. They're there for a good reason, but we want to understand, what were they trying to do when they yelled or said something insulting or even shamed their kid? And usually we find, oh, they were shamed. That part learned that somewhere. Okay,
Mhm.
well, let's help it heal and have compassion. We don't heal through more shame and guilt. So the antidote is that understanding and compassion.
Yeah.
And then that helps us, and that feels so wonderful and healing. And so as we heal that for ourselves, give ourselves that compassion, that's where we experience the inner shift.
Yeah.
Right? And what better gift for our kids than to have a parent who's learning to love themselves and forgive their errors, because we are all human, and
Yeah.
our kids will benefit from us being able to model that as well because they make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's by healing part by part by part that's still believing or trying to get control or has their agenda. And, almost often when we follow the path of these parts, it's coming from these old beliefs, these archaic ideas. And so we really get a chance to redo and to then decide, okay, we've healed that. We don't want to carry that belief, and that's a burdening, problematic belief. What's the new belief? And that's where we get the new information and we can recognize and clarify our values. Well, I'm going to prioritize connection over getting to school on time. So that might look like instead of my protective part that, wants to snap, control, manhandle my kid because in that moment, I think the most important thing is to get to school on time because if I don't, the principals and the teacher are going to think I'm a bad mom or you're not going to have life skills. We have parts that are very worried about the future. So it's like they overreact because they think, and that this might be true with the eating as well. Well, if you don't eat now, we have these parts that are so anxious about the future, they kind of project in that moment.
Mhm.
Well, you're always going to be like this. You don't, and so we overreact. So to recognize that's a worried part, that's not true right in this present moment. Yeah. And so it takes practice. It's not a one off, right? It's like every time we can understand our parts that are coming in and we connect with them from our self energy and we invite them to step back and let us lead, we can be more self led in our parenting.
Mhm.
And we're breaking those cycles for our children.
Yeah. And I also think something that's super important in what you mentioned is that you can always repair. You can
Yeah.
always go back and say, like, hey, I'm sorry, mommy was having a bit of a hard time. I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean it. And you kind of can repair in many different ways. And I think it's important to also understand that our kids, they just understand so much more than sometimes we think. And you can have these conversations early on and show them because even if they're not understanding fully this idea of maybe making a mistake or understanding it on a cognitive level, they can feel the energy of this connection. They can feel the energy of what's happening in this moment when you're trying to repair and the love you're giving them. So I think those moments are also very important and bringing a kind of like back full circle of what you said, like you're not a bad mom in those moments.
That's
It's
right. That's
just
right.
you're just reacting to something going on internally, and then once you start to pick up on these moments and start to try and repair and give yourself this self-compassion, magic can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. This idea of being a perfect mom, it needs to go, right? That kids don't need, that Donald Winnicott did research back in, I think, the 60s, was it 70s? Anyways, and he did these studies on moms and kids, and he came up with this concept called the good enough mother, the
Mhm.
good enough. And because he recognized by watching moms and children over time and studying that children benefit from reasonable and manageable disappointments from their mom, misattunements, let's say, right? That you don't have to be 100%. In fact, it's almost better if you're not because these for the children are moments where they kind of have to figure stuff out. They build from that adversity within them. And so they can feel now, obviously not all the time, but the percentage, I think someone's come up with a stat of 30%. Like if you're attuned to your children and connected with them, 30%. To me, I was shocked at how 30%, that's it? I could easily do 30%, right? But I think we carry this idea in our head we have to be 100% or 90% constantly attuned and present. It's that intensity, right? That intense. And that's actually not helpful. It's not realistic. And it's not necessary for our kids. That you are a good mom. If you're listening to this podcast, you're working on, being a better parent than how your parents parented you. I mean, you're doing the good work and you love your kids as best as you can, and that's good enough. So, yeah, hopefully that lands for people.
Yeah, I think good
Yeah.
enough is wonderful. Sounds
Yes.
great.
It sounds wonderful. I am a
It's a
good
good
mom,
goal.
Yeah. I'm a good mom. I don't need to
Yeah,
be a perfect mom in order to be a
yeah,
good mom. That's
yeah,
right.
and, the fact that, your child is still going to grow up in this loving home, even if you're just a good enough mom, I think
Yeah.
it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this perfect. Everything is every single interaction that's a little bit negative just because we're reactive doesn't mean your child's going to have trauma,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Think that's a fear because I think we're in a generation where we are reparenting ourselves so much and we're trying to break this generational trauma. And I find myself overthinking, like, okay, we had this situation yesterday. Is he going to forever hold that in his little body? I'm
Yeah.
questioning these things. Like, have
Right.
I created this traumatic moment? And I don't
Yeah.
think everything does.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, like back to repair. That's why repair is so important, right? Because being able to go to our kid, if something happens, and things are going to happen every day, most day, and when you go to back to your kid and you say, this was my issue, this wasn't about you, you liberate the kid and you protect them from then misinterpreting it. And that was kind of a lot of what we call small t trauma, if that lands for people, right? Not necessarily these big traumas as defined, within the DSM book that defines post traumatic stress disorder, but there's a lot of like smaller traumas, misattunement, unmet needs. And a lot of, I think, why our generation or my generation endured that is because parents didn't repair. You'd have negative experiences in your house and then you'd maybe be sent to your room. And so kids are not the best interpreters, right? Because their brains are not developed and they are kind of egocentric. And so like if mom's in a bad mood, and I don't know why, kids will start to formulate and usually it's a misinterpretation. It's that I did something wrong, right? So an example of, the parents' divorce and the 5-year-old thinks it's because of me. So the more we can actually explain to our kids in ways that show it's my emotion, I'm responsible, it's not on you, you did nothing wrong, the less our kids are going to carry more burdens into their own and their parts won't need to be so self-protective against us in our relationship and in our home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I feel like we can go on and talk about this forever. But in the interest of time, I'm going to ask
Yeah.
him a final question. If
Great.
you could
Sure.
offer one piece of wisdom to parents who want to raise healthier, more resilient children in today's world, what would it be?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like so much of what we talked about today
Yeah.
was kind of touching on that. I think if I had to choose one, it would be that you deserve healing. Like you deserve healing for you and that will most definitely benefit your children. So even if it's just a little bit of time to find more joy in your life, to relax yourself and get rid of some of your stress, whether it's take that class, take that yoga class, like you deserve to, yes, you might have to get the childcare and juggle some things, but you deserve it.
Hmm.
And to see that you deserve it for your own healing and your kids are going to benefit. And so everybody wins with that. So to just start to choose yourself a little bit more. So to kind of, it's a journey. Parenting is the opportunity for us to do that. And so just to see that's the benefit of motherhood is it's a chance for us to really love ourselves.
Yeah, I love that so much. It
Yeah,
rings so true.
good.
So your book, Unburdening Motherhood, when is it coming out?
It comes out January 27th of
Oh,
2026. So just,
congratulations!
yeah,
That's
I'm
great.
very excited. And so it's available now for pre-sales and you can search it on my website or, www.unburdeningmotherhood.com.
Okay, perfect. And if anybody wanted to connect with you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is drangele.close.com. So that's Angele is angel with an E at the end. It's French.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so they can find me there and there's a contact form. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle. So would happy to hear how this lands for them. If they're curious about IFS in motherhood and want to learn more, I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'll put everything, all the links in the show notes so it's easy for everybody to grab. But
Great.
Dr. Angel, thank you so much for coming on. I had such an amazing time. I learned a ton, and this was such a stimulating conversation. I'm sure people are going to really benefit from listening to this. So thank you for your time.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Lena.
Thanks so much for listening to the Livin'Sky Podcast. If this episode resonated, please leave a quick 5-star review or share it with another parent who'd love it too. It really helps more families find the support that they need. And don't forget to join my newsletter at LenaLivin'Sky.com for more tips and free guides. Sending a little sunshine to your kitchen today. See you next time.